The Story and the Engine, the fifth episode of Doctor Who's second season, or 15th series, debuted yesterday on the 10th of May 2025 and was written by Inua Ellens. Now, this was actually quite a big deal, according to behind-the-scenes information, as Inua Ellens was a Doctor Who fan previously when he watched the show back in the 1980s, and he later grew up to become quite a popular writer, even writing a popular stage play called Barbershop Chronicles, to which apparently he dropped a note to Ross T. Davies saying, "Can't wait to see what you're going to come up with next," and Ross T. Davies came back to him and said, would you be open to write a story that's kind of similar to Barbershop Chronicles for Doctor Who? To which apparently Ncuti Gatwa was really excited about it, as he wanted to see Doctor Who do a story kind of set in part of Africa. Anyway, the story sees the 15th Doctor, played once again by Gatwa, and his companion Belinda Chandra, played by Varada Sethu, land in Lagos, Nigeria in 2019. The Doctor mainly lands there because he knows the signal will be particularly good there for them to do their validation. However, the Doctor says that while he's there, he may also want to quickly pop into his favourite barber shop. To which it does lead to an exchange between him and Belinda that I rather like, as the Doctor says he wants to pop into this barber shop, and Belinda's like, "I thought the TARDIS does your hair," and he's like, well, yes, she does, but there's a thing. He explains that his people regenerate and they can change their faces and the like, and he says, but since I've come into this latest regeneration, the first one that's kind of truly black, I find that in a lot of places it's kind of difficult to be accepted, and here, that barber shop, that's a place where I do feel kind of accepted. To which Belinda seems to say she kind of understands and agrees with this, stating that her grandmother used to take her whenever she could for trips back to India, and that's places where Belinda felt accepted. So she allows the Doctor to pop along. The Doctor heads to this barber shop, meeting up with an old friend named Omo Osoda, played by Sula Rimi. I apologise for any of the actors if I mispronounce names. However, he finds that the barbershop is now under a new management and has a new barber played by Arion Bakr, who actually for Sul Rimi and Arion Bakr, this is actually not the first time they've done Doctor Who. Sul appeared back in 2005 in Aliens of London as a unit soldier. He isn't credited as such, but he was in there. And Bakr appeared as Leandro, the kind of lion-faced creature that works with Ishilda in The Woman Who Lived back in 2015. And soon things start to come out, and it's revealed the barbershop isn't quite as it once was. As while the Doctor is able to access it from Lagos in Nigeria, it is both in Lagos, Nigeria, and not, as it is also at the same time on the back of a giant robotic spider. And what the barber is forcing it, the barber is working with a kind of goddess named Abina, played by Michelle Asante, but is also keeping Omo and three other patrons of the barbershop, named Rashid, played by Stefan Adegbola, Tunde, played by Jordan Adine, and Abioma, played by Michael Balogun, is keeping them there, and every day they get haircuts and they tell stories. And these stories kind of power the engine that kind of powers the giant spider mech. And basically when they're done, they kind of regrow their hair and they have to tell more stories in order to kind of keep the ship going. With it ultimately being revealed that the barber he's not a god. Before this episode started, I kind of saw the kind of stuff that was going to go on in this episode, and I thought there might be a possibility the barber was actually a member of the Pantheon, like another one of the gods, like we've faced before, like the toy maker, the trickster, Sutek, Lux. I thought maybe he's one of those. Maybe the barber is another addition to the pantheon. Turns out he's not, although he does know of the gods, and seemingly the reason why he wants everyone to tell these stories is he wants to power them in order to get through to the nexus and get to the center where he can destroy the gods, because he feels bitter at them, because he inspired stories about the gods, and then they took it for granted and left him with nothing, which is why he ultimately wants to destroy them. Ultimately, I also read somewhere that supposedly some people think this is like a companion piece to last year's Dot and Bubble, to which watching Series 15 so far, I thought, man, might this possibly be another kind of parallel to Dot and Bubble? I mean, like the first episode, that's the first episode. The second episode shows us a new member of the Pantheon. Like last year they had Maestro, this year they had Lux. Episode 3, that's normally a bit more dark and sinister and usually seen as one of the best episodes of the series, like with Boom and then later with The Well. And then you got the Dr. Light story with Lucky Day this year and 73 Yards last year. Might this be like Dot and Bubble, this being the kind of controversial story? Personally, I thought we had the controversial story last week with Lucky Day. This, for me, I know that people say it's kind of a parallel to Dot and Bubble. Like the argument they gave was that at the end of Dot and Bubble, it's that the Doctor discovers he is not really accepted in this kind of new... oh god, what's the word? These people, he is not accepted by them because of a racial undertone. And that this is ultimately a parallel to that story because this is a place where the Doctor is accepted. Personally, I don't really see the connection all that much, but I do personally think this is a really good story. I will also admit, while there were some parts of the story that I didn't truly understand, like they were going quite quickly, I was like, whoa, slow down a minute, let me catch up. But I do think that this is an episode that, if I watch it a few more times, I think this could actually be one of my favourites. And it is a really good story. And it did also include a surprise I was not expecting, which is that when Abina steps forward and begins telling that she was the daughter of a god, the Doctor saved her, he was going to take her away, and then ultimately the Doctor left her behind here in Lagos, Nigeria, and she just had to live that way. We then see the surprise return of the fugitive Doctor, played by Jo Martin. Well, not exactly. It's in fact, a bit of a flashback. We see her weave around the Doctor's, weave around the head, and then see Ncuti talking, and then suddenly it's Jo Martin's Doctor. To which, I guess it's supposed to be more a flashback sequence, or this adventure previously happened with the fugitive Doctor, and that's how it's supposed to be. But one thing I do like about including the fugitive Doctor in here is that I do know that there are people who criticise the era in which the fugitive Doctor came from, like Jodie Whittaker's time aboard the TARDIS and Chris Chibnall's time as showrunner. But I am happy that they're still acknowledging those years happened. There are elements in those stories, we are still going to come back to them. I do like that they're not just putting it to the side and going, okay, we're never going to do another story with Jo Martin. Like, I am glad to see her back here. And ultimately it does lead... This is a story drenched in African culture. Like, they actually spoke specifically to people from Nigeria and Lagos and these areas to make sure they did this episode right and captured the full feel of a Nigerian or African barbershop, to which they are places of great culture, which I do like to see. This is a story, as I said, that while there were elements of the story that I struggled with, I do think that if I watch this a couple of more times, I could grow to really like this episode, and it might be one of the ones, to me, that surprisingly comes out quite high. Ultimately, so far with my ranking, I think I would put the story in the engine just below The Well. Like, I'd say The Well is the best, and then the story in the engine just behind it. But who knows? In a few months' time, if I watch through this episode again, maybe this episode comes out. because I do think that this is a great one for showing the kind of different cultures. And supposedly they did originally consider kind of flying everyone out to kind of film this properly in Lagos. However, given that 200 people flying out to make this episode would be a bit expensive, they had to recreate it in Cardiff. But I think they did a really good job. So I'm going to leave it there. But if you haven't seen The Story in the Engine yet, for me, this is a fantastic story. My second best so far, but could easily slip up to number 1. But we'll wait to see how the rest of the season goes. As next week comes one of the episodes that I've been really looking forward to, the Interstellar Song Contest. What'll happen in that episode? We'll have to wait and see. Until then, see ya.